All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us as we talk about mental health through a student's lens. And we're going to start with some introductions. I'm Christy Berger. I currently serve as a director of school counseling and mental health in Center Grove Schools.
And I'm Annie Cole. I am the Regional Program Associate for Bring Change to Mind here in Indiana.
And then we have 4 students with us today, and we will let them do quick introductions. And we'll just go in the order that's on the screen. So Sasha, you want to just say hi?
Yeah, hi, my name is Sasha. I'm in 11th grade. I go to Newburyport High School in Massachusetts, and I'm part of the BC2M program there.
Hi, I'm Pierre. I'm going to be in 12th grade this coming year. I am attending Bloomington High School North in Bloomington, Indiana, and I am a secretary for Bring Change to Mind at my school.
Hi, my name is Alexia. I recently just graduated from Millennium High School in Arizona, and I've been a part of Bring Change to Mind for 3 years now.
Hi, I'm Veronica. You can read it on the screen. I use any pronouns. I'm going to be in my sophomore year, and I go to North.
Wonderful. Well, we are so thankful for you all to join us. We know it's most important to hear from students when we're talking about things that pertain to students. And so we really appreciate you giving your time to come together so that we can learn from one another and grow in our development. To kind of lay the foundation. So whenever we're talking about mental health and the importance of mental health, before we just open up the conversation, I think it's really important to have a fair foundation and kind of all under the same understanding of what we're talking about. So today, when we're talking about mental health, we're really talking about that emotional, the psychological, and your social well-being. We all know that mental health affects how we think, feel, and how we act. It's not one or the other. Sometimes it's all, and sometimes it can be intertwined. When we're talking about mental health, we are talking about a continuum, which will show a visual of that looks like. And we're talking about mental health in the realm that it is different from mental illness. Mental illness is on the continuum of mental health. However, it is not all that we're talking about today. And we also know that we can learn a ton of coping strategies and skills, kind of what we learned through Bring Change to Mind, to help with our mental health, depending on where we are each and every day and each and every moment. Some information about Indiana, since this is specifically for Indiana educators, even though we have some other state guests, just some information that has been updated since the pandemic. So this was through the Youth Risk Behavior Survey in 2020, and this is students responding to questions in Indiana who are at the high school level. And so that information shared with us that about 28% of our students have seriously considered attempting suicide. 54% of our students strongly agree that they feel close to people at school. And as somebody who was a school counselor for over 10 years, that stat really stood out to me, that only about half of our students feel like they have an adult that they can trust and feel close to at school. And so that's really hard to hear, but I'm thankful that the students' voices are sharing that so we can work on helping that problem. About 15% of Hoosier students reported being bullied on school grounds. 47% of our students in grades 6 through 12 have reported feeling sad or hopeless for 2 weeks in a row. So this is where we're kind of talking about that mental illness, right? When we are seeing that continued behavior show up, that continued feeling and emotion show up, that's where we're looking more at that mental illness on that continuum. 38% of Hoosier students live with someone who is mentally ill or has been suicidal. And so many times when our students are coming to school and they're coming from home, there may be things going on there that affects their day-to-day. We also know that at times, students who live with somebody who has a mental health concern can be more at risk for having their own mental health concern, which is why it's really important that we share this conversation and have this topic at school. I think this video does a great job of just talking about the mental health continuum, but also really talking about whose role and whose responsibility is it to discuss mental health. So let's see if we can get it to play for about 2 minutes.
I wonder why we think school is the best place for services when it really should be the parents' responsibility to take care of that and not the schools. Talk to me about that.
So our kids' mental health is a shared responsibility. It most certainly falls on the shoulders of families as well as on the shoulders of schools. It's really not any one entity's responsibility to take care of the well-being of our young people. It's part of the mission of schools because we know in order for kids to do well in reading, in math, in the other things that we need to teach them in the school day, they have to be becoming healthy, both physically healthy and mentally healthy. That's why we have school nurses in schools. We need to make sure kids are healthy and ready to learn, right? So it's everybody's responsibility. So it's part of the reason. But we also know that a lot of kids won't access mental health supports unless they're offered where they are every day. And it is a family's choice where they choose to get mental health treatment if that's something that comes up for them. Many families do choose to get their kids treatment in the school environment, in part because it feels less threatening sometimes to a lot of families. So even though it's a personal issue, oftentimes families tell us it's more comfortable for them to actually get services in the school building than it is to go to a community mental health center, right? Families, when they go to get mental health treatment in the community, usually attend 1 to 4 appointments on average, which means that most families are dropping out of care before a typical kind of dose of treatment can happen. Most evidence-based interventions for kids who are struggling with mental health challenges are longer than 4 weeks. So most kids in the community aren't getting the mental health supports that they need for the full duration. The no-show rate in community mental health settings is well above 50%. So most therapists are sitting in their office, with families not showing up about half the time. That doesn't happen in the school building. If you talk to any school social worker, any mental health professional from the community who's working in the school, they don't even eat lunch most days, right? Because they're constantly seeing students and families as well. I think there's a misconception that when you're working in schools, you're not working with families. We see families all the time when we're working with kids in schools. And again, it's up to the family. If they want to get mental health supports in the community, fabulous. But we also want to make it accessible to everybody. And doing it in the school is hands down the most accessible way that you can get mental health supports to everybody.
So I love that short clip because I think it talks about the importance of that shared responsibility. And so I think that's why clubs such as Bring Change to Mind are so important to be embedded in our schools as well, just to have that continuum of support. Obviously, in this short clip, we're talking about treatment. And so that's one end of the spectrum, whereas the other end is that stigma decreasing and really being intentional with those supports and having that conversation and providing strategies and supports for our students. And so I just think it's really important to talk about that shared responsibility. And some feel comfortable in school doing that because that's the people that they trust, but some don't. And that's great. And that's fine. Whatever works best for the family is most important. However, I think it's just really important to talk about how we can help eliminate those barriers. So she brings up the mental health continuum, which I use this visual within our school district a lot, really just to connect that at times we might be in crisis, right? And it kind of aligns to the battery or even the amount of service, like the bars on your phone or the bars on your iPad, and just talks about how we can kind of ebb and flow through that. And so when we're talking with younger students too, that's really helpful. But just always kind of having that check and that internal gauge of where am I today on my mental health continuum. I was sharing earlier that over the weekend I was sick. And so I was kind of in that struggling. I've turned a corner at sunshine and I'm just in a much better space today. So I'd be more in that green and I'd be thriving today. And so I just think the visual of really talking about what mental health is and what it looks like is really important for us as educators, but also when we're talking with our students and making sure that we're having the ability to see and reflect just where those different emotions and feelings are. So that kind of leads us perfectly to bringing it to our our experts that are here with us today on our panel. And we have several questions to really just start the conversation and have that dialogue about mental health and the importance of that for schools and for students alike. And so I want to start with the first question just being, what aspect of mental health do you feel is most impacting yourself and or your peers? And whoever wants to start can open us up.
I feel like the aspect of mental health that affects me and my peers the most is definitely like motivation. And because being motivated in school and in general life can be really difficult if you're struggling with your mental health. And that's one of those aspects that just makes, being around so much more difficult. Because, it's just like you really want to do the things, but you can't. You don't have any drive, you don't have any motivation. And that definitely affects a lot of people, at least in my community, including myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And also, especially in my school, it's a lot of like that academic pressure and like that parental pressure. My school, I'm from Massachusetts, but we're like one of the top 5% schools, for academics. So it's really like competitive. There's a lot of that culture and a lot of pressure on students, and they really start to feel that, especially towards the end of the year.
And there's a lot of like, schools are not built typically for neurodivergent brains. So there's a lot of that feeling of like, oh, I'm not excelling in this class. I can't get my work done. That must mean that I'm not smart and I'm not going to like succeed in life. When in reality, it's just like the system is not working for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And, that's another reason to like talk more about mental health, because it's just the school system isn't built exactly perfectly. I mean, nothing really is, but the school system isn't necessarily built for people whose brains function differently, neurodivergent people such as myself and others like my friends. And it's difficult. And that can cause more dips in motivation. It's just like, I'm not there with everybody else, and that makes me want to do it less. It's kind of like that feeling. It's just like, this isn't working for me. I don't want to do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Which is also like counselors are very important. And like being able to get like IEPs and 504 plans and stuff. But a lot of students, they don't know that that exists unless like they're actively told. So that's like a big part of what our Bring Change to Mind Club at least is trying to do, is like spread awareness about the resources they have right there.
So can I interject real quick? Talk a little bit about that. As a student that's in high school and you hear you need an IEP or a 504 to support your mental well-being, how do you think that would make you feel? How do you think others might feel if that suggestion was brought to them?
I can kind of broadly talk about it.
Yeah.
So I haven't had personal experience with that, but I have a lot of friends and family members who have.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this is like widespread, but in my school district, it can be really difficult to get teachers to actually like respect that, especially when it's for mental health reasons. A lot of times you're like, oh, it's a suggestion, and like it's not.
Yeah.
So that's what I've seen.
Yep.
IEP and 504 plans are so important. And both of my brothers have IEPs. I was supposed to get an IEP at one point, but I was rejected, which is fine. That's the way it happens. But it's just like that. There are teachers and also just students who don't quite understand the concept, and it's just like, oh, well, you should be doing as much work as everyone else or whatever. But I mean, it is the same amount of work. It's just different for a differently working brain.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like to create an even playing field. It's not to like give this student with poor mental health an advantage over others. It's just so that they can get through school. And it's so incredibly important that we bring more awareness to IEPs and 504s, because, you know, sometimes it's just like, it's such an unknown thing. And then it's just like, because of that, there's a little bit of stigma around it. Like, oh, they're just trying to make it easier for that student. Well, yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. That student needs the assistance, and I feel like they should be more normalized.
Going
I
on about
agree.
the stigma of that too, the entire process of going through it also kind of separates them from everyone else.
Mm.
It's a lot harder to accept those things that they're actually needed and that it's acceptable when it's creating two different paths. When it
Mm.
really is just one path, but taking it differently. It's two different roads going to the same place.
Yeah.
So on that end, it also creates the idea that like, oh, I am different from everyone else, but it's okay to be different than everyone else.
Yeah.
I think
And I think,
oh, sorry.
no, I want you guys to talk. Go ahead.
Well, like the problem kind of comes when like the student is actively like singled out in class,
Mm.
because they might not necessarily want other people drawing attention to like this mental health like problem that they have, especially like if they're like not like the most open with like the rest of their class or like their community about it, and like that's totally okay.
Yeah.
But like sometimes a student like being like, okay, so you're not going to take this today and you have to go like to this room in front of like everyone, that can definitely make you feel othered.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think to the motivation piece that you all were speaking on earlier, I think Pierre, maybe you're the one who brought that up at first, but that's what I have seen with some of our students that have a 504 and IEP for mental health, but then have to advocate for needing that intervention at that time, when that might be a place where they're not feeling motivated. So they're not going to be coming up to an adult and saying, I need extra time or I need help. And so I just was interested. That's kind of why I asked that question. I was just interested to see the perspective that you all bring to that. And I think what I hear is that we want people to know it's a resource for them, but we also want our teachers to be aware that it is required and it is not an easy way out per se, but it's a way to support the way that that student's brain learns. So I thought that was a great point that you guys brought up.
I think also as a former teacher, it's like trusting that a student, you know, teaching them the tools to advocate for their needs, but then also trusting that they then know how to advocate for their needs and listening when they advocate for it, regardless of the age. I mean, I used to teach elementary, and you work so hard to teach them skills that are in the 504 or in the IEP. And then when they advocate and use those, you know, terms and use that I need this or this, it's trusting that and respecting it. And regardless, like no questions asked, doing it. I ran into that with my own colleagues of, you know, oh, they just needed this. And it's like, no, we want them to advocate for that. They're 8 years old and know how to advocate, and respecting that regardless of the age too.
So for our next question, thinking about mental health, when and where were you first exposed to what mental health is, or what resources are available for yourself or others?
Probably when Project Middle Way came to my school for the first time. I mean, I don't know if this is like that much of a thing in like other states. But like Project Middle Way is this organization. They mainly like focus on helping survivors of like domestic abuse.
Okay.
But they also have like a ton of hotlines that help with like, for example, like if you're like queer and you need to reach out to someone, or if you are dealing with like abuse in your household, stuff like that. And they came in and kind of, they taught us about like consent. They taught us about like how to react when other people like come to you and they tell you like maybe they've been sexually assaulted, or maybe that they like are struggling with mental health problems. I think that was the first time, and I think that was the first time a lot of my classmates thought about that too.
Was that middle school or high school?
Yeah, that was in middle school, around like 5th or 6th grade.
Wow, great.
I was definitely a little bit later. So I would say it was probably 8th grade for me when it really came to like my mind, because that's when COVID started happening. And with that, a lot of conversations came about supporting students' mental health and supporting anyone's mental health. So I think that was really my first like direct confrontation.
Unfortunately, I was not introduced to mental health or any of that stuff till I got to high school, which is very similar in time period near like my freshman year. COVID hit right after freshman year when everyone's talking about that stuff, but then it all goes away after the talks of COVID was gone.
Yeah.
But that's kind of why we're starting these conversations to make sure that it doesn't just go away. So that was mine, but I'm just lucky it's continued.
Yeah.
My introduction to mental health was when I was in like 5th grade, because I had been struggling with it really bad. And, I was expressing things to my friends in elementary school that were concerning, and they told teachers. And then I went to the social worker at my elementary school, and then I started going to therapy because, it's just, mental health can affect anyone of any age, and it's a conversation that needs to be had definitely early on. It's just like, hey, if you're feeling like really bad, tell someone.
Yeah.
And we can help you.
Do you think how early is too early?
Never.
That's a great question.
I mean, maybe like when they're 1 year old and they don't understand language, but like,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you can't like go up to like a 5-year-old and be like, hey, I think you have disruptive mood regulation disorder, like whatever. But teaching like children how to express their feelings and how to be like, hey, I feel uncomfortable when you do this, or just to like communicate clearly, that's so important. And like, I don't know.
I 100% agree with Veronica here. It's just starting very simple when they're young. Like, tell me if you feel bad, or just like if somebody is making you uncomfortable, be loud. Say, you're making me uncomfortable. You're making me uncomfy. Stop it. Or, just like teaching kids like basic safety rules, and, being available for your kid to talk to. So if something happens, your kid can talk to you, and kids can talk to people and, tell them what they're feeling. And then those conversations about mental health can get more and more complex as they get older, as their brains get more complex, as things are better understood. So it's not like as soon as the baby pops right out, you are going to have to face the struggles of trying to find a job with depression when you are 22 years old. No, it's more like just, once just teaching boundaries and teaching communication skills and all of that stuff.
Well, so many parents, they don't want there to be anything like wrong with their child. So they just like purposefully will not like look into it or something, especially with like the more stigmatized disorders. Like if there's early signs of like autism, for example, parents are going to be like, oh, she's just like so bright and so like talkative, and obviously like there's nothing wrong with her, she's just like a quirky little child. But then that means that later in life they are going to have to seek out help on their own, and they're going to have to deal with living in a world that doesn't understand them on their own because they don't have the words to express how they feel or who they are,
In a more personal sense, by the time that a child starts to understand their physical attributes, how they can start to feel if they feel sick, that's the point when we should start talking about how your brain feels too, because at that point they're able to start understanding. It's like if you fall down and you scrape your knee, you're going to know that it hurts. That's the same point you should start saying. If you start feeling extremely sad, or you start being worried when you're not supposed to, why are we not having those conversations at the same time?
Yeah, and I think another point is like Bring Change to Mind is all about reducing the stigma around mental illness and mental health. And if you start these conversations young, there's not as much of a stigma. And I think that really comes from the environment that kids grow up in. So
yeah, I think that's a great point. And I was thinking as the conversation was going about how early did I learn that you had to eat vegetables and drink milk and do all of those things. It should just be along with that, right? Like you have to do these things to physically feel well, to sleep, and then how do you mentally feel well? And if they would just be kind of all go hand in hand, that could really help decrease some of that stigma. So what does it look like to get support from an adult? How do you prefer that? So say you're struggling or you have a friend that's struggling. How do you prefer to talk to an adult, get help from adult? What does that look like?
Well, one thing I notice is that when you go to an adult for help, their idea of helping tends to be very like solution oriented typically. I mean, I don't want to generalize, but it seems like a lot of the time when you like open up about your mental health struggles or something that's like happening at school, the first reaction is like, okay, well, what can we do to fix this? Like, what should you be doing differently? And I think maybe we should try and meet it with understanding, or at least a little empathy first, because obviously to you, you're like an adult, you have a job, you have a career, you have like a whole thing going, and you don't really remember how it feels when everything is like life or death to you.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the times that leads you to be like, oh my God, you're older, it's not going to matter. And maybe that's the case. That doesn't mean it doesn't matter like right now.
And then, just kind of like adding on to that a little bit, just, I forgot what I was going to say. Somebody else can talk. I need to turn my gears.
Sasha, were you going to say something?
I was just gonna kind of say like who I would reach out to within my school. So I go to, I don't know what size you would call it, but we have about like 800 students. So we only have a couple guidance counselors, and in my experience, they are very like booked up. Like you just cannot get in to see them unless you're having a panic attack in the hallway. Like that's the only way you're gonna get to them. So I feel like those lines of communication in the school definitely need to be fixed. Because a lot of times it's just the kids with IEPs who are able to get those resources. And then other kids who haven't been evaluated don't necessarily have access.
Great point.
So I am very lucky to have come from a school that has a lot of support staff. I'm in a school of over 1,000 kids, almost 2,000 at times, depending on how big our graduating classes are. So we have 5 counselors. We had a social worker. We had all kinds of people that we could go to. The problem is we also have the problem that students don't want to go to those people. Mm-hmm. They tend to stay in their immediate circles. So whether that's their friends, if they have a favorite teacher, they go to them first, which is great. Like I totally say go to the people that you trust, but then they also have to be the ones to say, when are you taking your next steps? Like, who else can we take these conversations to? Because our teachers, unfortunately, are not trained to take on that kind of information.
Right.
And neither are our friends. Mm-hmm. So it's good that they are talking to people, but we also need to make sure that we're giving them next steps to who to go to.
That's a great point. Really just connecting them to someone who can get them the right support that they might need at that time. That's a great point. Yeah, thank you for that.
Absolutely. And I think another thing that, we as Brain Change to Mind can do to, provide more resources in schools is, just like make general announcements about mental health services in the community and advocate for more mental health services in the school. So like Sasha's school having around 800 students in the student body and not having a lot of counselors, making that more difficult, maybe just like speaking to the school board in some way and, maybe even petitioning for more counselor positions and more mental health training at these schools that don't have as much, mental health oriented support and just support in general. Because it's so important to have that kind of support in such a convenient place. And, like it was said in the videos, that makes mental health resources so much more accessible when it's in school. So yeah, that's just my thoughts on that. Just having it more advertised and more accessible and, getting people to know, like, oh yeah, this company, they do this company downtown, they do mental health evaluations, and they can get you a nurse practitioner and all of that wonderful stuff.
I know, Alexia, you brought up how sometimes students use kind of a variety of safe people. Like safe people can look different for every student, every person. In your opinions, if you're thinking about like who is your safe person in your life, because this audience is predominantly educators, and I know they're in this session because they're interested in hearing from students and student perspectives and want to be that safe person. How, like, what qualities or what can they do to be that safe person for students?
I can start. So my safe person within my school personally is actually my BC2M advisor. I love her. She's also the Bright Room counselor. I don't know if you guys know what the Bright program is.
Nope.
So basically it's for students coming out of hospitalization or long periods away from school, normally for mental health reasons. So they get their own room in the school. They have a like certified counselor. So they have a lot of resources, what's really amazing. But she has been my support system this year just because she genuinely cares, and like she always checks in with me. She's like, we're doing so much in the club right now, but like, are you doing okay? Like, are you staying on top of this? What's really helpful. So yeah.
When it comes to people who are like considered my support people, it's always the people who can make your day better by not even trying. Like there's always the people who can be there for you and will be there, but it's always the people who you can walk in the room and they'll smile at you and ask you how your day is. It's not necessarily every day we have to sit down and talk to them. It's all of a sudden I walked into this classroom and your smile lit up my day. Thank you for making my day. Like it's not necessarily a single person every day either. Sometimes the person that makes your day and is your support that day might be someone you haven't seen in 3 months, but all of a sudden you saw them today and that made your day better.
Yeah.
And, my support in the school is, my favorite teachers, and the social worker at my school, Miss Autry. I don't know if we were supposed to name drop her or not, but I did. She's the social worker at my school, and she's actually really good at what she does. And she has helped me navigate a lot of really confusing situations since my freshman year. And I'm going into my senior year, and I'm going to need her help more. And I can trust that she'll know what to do. She's gotten me out of some really tough situations. She's helped me through things. And, it's just like, if I'm struggling with somebody, if something's bothering me, if I need help, and I need questions answered and I need support, I can go to her and tell her all of these things. And then just as like Alexia was talking about how like, oh, there's those people that make your day. It's like my favorite teachers and my friends in school. It's just like looking at them and like doing fun things. Like me and my choir director, we quip at each other a lot. It's really fun. And it's just like, even on the days where I feel like keeling over and crying, if I walk into that choir room and I look at the choir director, I know I'm going to feel better, because that is a warm, fuzzy guy.
Dr. Sorry.
Dr. Bove.
But
it's just like
as an individual and not a class.
And seeing your friends in the hallway, and me and my friends, we were always going like, "You," and it's great. Just having those connections in school can make dealing with those difficult situations a lot easier. And having a professional counselor to talk to in school, as well as having those people that make you feel safe. And yeah.
How has Bring Change to Mind been important to you? and been important to your school? So bring change to mind. I'll explain a little bit for the viewers in a minute, but looks different in every school. So that's why I wanted to ask this question of our students. So how has it been important to you and to your school community?
Well, for us, I mean, for my club at least, our school does this thing called like tutorial in the middle of the day, which is basically like a period where you can kind of go to whatever room you want, do whatever you want. So we have meetings on Thursdays during tutorial a lot. And I guess for me, it's just kind of like a break from the day, you know, like you're not really expected to like, I don't know, be like doing like schoolwork or be on all the time. It's a place where you can just like kind of be yourself, be safe, like unwind, all that good stuff.
And at our school, we like to especially note that it's not like a therapy club. It's, you know, it's to be spreading awareness and breaking down the stigma. And it's a really safe environment that has given me a sense of community at Bloomington High School North. And, you know, as the club continues to grow and as we continue to talk and have field trips and plan events, it's really great. It's been so wonderful. And I've only been involved this past year, but it's really one of the best things that's happened.
Yeah, so I love being a part of BC2M. So I am like going to my senior year. So I've been a part of BC2M for 3 years. I joined my freshman year, and I've been on tab for their teen advisory board. I'm on the Northeast one because I'm out of Massachusetts. But I've been on that for, I think, 2 years also. So it's been a really great opportunity for me, and it's a big support system for my entire school. We created our club right after the suicide of a couple students and coming out of COVID. So it was a really big support system, and we've done a lot to like give resources to students and provide like that information that you just don't typically get.
I have been so lucky to see my club from the beginning to the end, because not the end, that's a bad term, but of my high school experience from beginning to end, because our club started 1 year before I joined, but it was the COVID year. So there were no clubs around. Everything was shut down. So I came in year 2. I had no idea what was going on. But it created a sense of not only a community on our campus, but also has changed the way that our campus goes about things. Like, we have a theme for all of our months. So our club goes in and we say, okay, how can we take our theme of our school and we take it and we also include our mental health aspect to it. We made thank you cards for Thanksgiving just to help everyone to see and experience the thankfulness of the season. Like, it really does make the entire campus feel together. It's not just our club, even though we're so tight knit, you couldn't separate us if you wanted to. Then you also get your entire campus who all just can see the change that's happening within them.
Amazing.
So for people on the call or on the session that don't know a ton about Bring Change to Mind, do you share the resources as like flyers, social media posts, all of the above? Like, how do you get resources and information in the hands of students in your building?
So for me, what we do is we really focus on activities.
Okay.
And then we share resources that way. So for example, I'm still in school. So we have finals week coming up. We had our standardized testing, all that stuff. So I brought in therapy dogs for a bunch of days, what our school's never done before. So people were excited. They came, and then we handed them out resources also.
Neat.
So kind of getting them in the door and then sending them away with resources.
I love that.
We've done flyers and we did booths, which was good because people who weren't in the club did not know what we were. So we did booths. We did a karaoke party at the end of the year, which was super fun. And we made sure to we kind of roped them in. We were just like, karaoke party in this room, flyers and snacks. Oh, also, this is sponsored by our club once they got there. So so that we could be like, it's okay, guys. We're not always sad and talking about death. We can also sing
Yeah.
and play Just Dance every time.
Yeah, and our club, we actually had a trip to the Indianapolis Zoo this school year, and it was a huge group trip, and it was, you know, mostly people that were already in the club, but then it brought so much more attention to the club. I was just like, yes, this is, you know, we're a community and we can provide you resources and also get you in for a good time. So it's just like, I feel like our club is focused a lot on community, and I really appreciate that, honestly. And you know, that's how we spread resources. We also have our wonderful PR running the Instagram and TikTok accounts for our school, and you know, spreading resources that way, you know, sharing things from the Bring Change to Mind national account and sharing other mental health resources. And yeah.
So you kind of, with our club, we kind of have to work with our generation. So not only do we have to get them to us, but also you have all kinds of social media now where even just sharing a quote now, all of a sudden people are curious what you're doing. You get people who are very tangible, so you hand them things. You could have someone hear it. Like any way that you could also teach someone something, you can give them resources that way. So we've tried everything, and I'm hoping it's working.
Love it. As we are kind of wrapping up the panel discussion, I just kind of want to open the floor for our last question. Is there anything else you'd like to share with this group of amazing educators that are watching this?
I personally just like, not to end this on like a bad note, but I do just want to point out that like having a relationship with the administration at my school has been so important. Because like there are people around that do not like that I talk about mental health. And like it's well known that like I'm the person who's doing this at our school. And like I have had formal complaints, like I've had people try to get me in trouble with the schools. So it's just like having that protection from my administration has been really nice. And like the support of teachers is often like they do try, but there are some gaps that do need to be filled.
Support your support your queer and trans students right now, please. It's a scary time. Things are happening. There are bills.
Yeah, it's just a very scary place to be right now, and especially like for queer students and such. And so all of that tension is going to cause the mental health of queer students to kind of take a swan dive. And so just being a protective figure and being open with the resources, and you know, I personally feel like teachers should have a little bit of mental health training, more importantly in like de-escalation and you know, understanding how to handle situations of mental health, having a little bit more training with that. And, you know, also having training with like physical health situations too. I know that's kind of different, but it can tie in because, you know, having a physical health situation in the middle of class can bring more attention to that student and make them feel put on the spot and damage the mental health. Like if somebody were to start, I don't know, having a seizure in the middle of class and then they come back to school and it's just like, wow, that was really embarrassing. People are looking at me weird and I feel kind of pushed out, you know. Just being there, being accommodating, being understanding. And I definitely feel like schools and administrations should be giving teachers training on how to handle mental health situations and physical health situations, to, you know, create a safer environment.
Wonderful.
And also, sorry, just like one more thing.
That's okay.
Also, I understand that academics are like very important and you want your students to succeed in school and you want them to have a good future, and that's great. But sometimes for a student, the priority is just like staying alive, you know? And sometimes that pressure can just feel like even more of something just like pushing them towards that edge. So just try and be a supportive voice.
My big word is always like acceptance and accommodation. You need to be accepting to all your students. Make sure that they are accepting of you. Make sure that you're ready to help them if they need you. Be that opening door. Be that person that they want to come to. They will find your people. They will find their people. You will find your people. It's just, you have to be willing to open that door. You can't shut the students down either. Like, that's the easiest way to all of a sudden not have anyone who will come to you, and you will create problems. You just got to be ready, because unfortunately our generation and the generations coming up have all kinds of stuff that is coming up to us that scares us. You just got to be ready to accept all that and ready to help them, because we want you guys to help us, but it's conversations are two-way streets.
Great. What a perfect way to kind of bring us back to the purpose of our time together, and you all coming on and just having open, honest, real conversations. I know that'll help a lot of the adults and educators on this call. And I just have heard over and over, I wish Bring Change to Mind would have been around when I was a student, but I've heard that from you all, that was really important. And so I'm going to let Annie give a little plug about how to bring a club to your school, if that's of interest.
Yeah, so Bring Change to Mind. We were just a little bit quick snapshot of Bring Change to Mind. I'm not going to cover everything, so I encourage you to explore using that website. I know you can't click on it in this, but if you just Google Bring Change to Mind, it will bring you to our website. Our program has been around for over, our actual organization was started in 2010 by Glenn Close, the actress, to end the stigma around mental illness and mental health. In 2015 is when we started the high school program. So we are a national nonprofit. We're in over 520 clubs across the country, over 40 states. Indiana is one of our regions. So we're in technically 7 different regions, even though we're all over the country. Indiana is where we have people like myself and my colleague Karen working with our schools in person. So I get to work with Veronica and Pierre at Bloomington North High School, as well as we're in about 90 high schools currently here in Indiana. But so we are all around that advocacy and education bit with mental health. So we are not therapy services. We aren't mental health services. We're not in place of them. We're in part of that continuum. So like Christy mentioned, that continuum of mental health and continuum of support. And so we're a great way to, again, educate, like these students have mentioned today. It's a peer-led model. We are free in schools, and we actually give grant money to all of our schools to use to put on these events, these activities, that kind of thing. But what I love most is that youth voice. We really do have that youth voice at the center of our organization, and are always looking for avenues like this presentation to encourage our students, to give them that platform and that voice to continue this work beyond just their traditional club meetings. So if you're interested in bringing Bring Change to Mind to your school or to your community, we do still have funding spots available for Indiana before we would have to start a wait list. We do have wait lists all over the country, but Indiana, we currently do not have one. So we partner here with IDOE as well as the Indianapolis Colts and their Kicking the Stigma initiative, and are always looking to partner with students and again in schools and give your students a voice for that advocacy around their mental health and mental well-being. So yeah, my email is also at the bottom of the slide if you would like to reach out to me personally.
Thanks, Annie. We also listed several other resources to help support your youth. So maybe a flow chart that you make for the students in your family or in your school to share with families. Seize the Awkward is a really great campaign for adolescent students to really have those conversations. It gives them conversation starters to talk to a friend that they're concerned about. A mental health one-pager is always helpful of encouraging families and students to know when it's time to reach out and talk to their doctor about some concerns to make sure they're getting that support that's needed. And so those are some resources that are linked there for you as well. And last, we ask that you fill out your evaluation of our time together today and get your PGP certificate. So please fill out the link there and you will get your participation point for participating during our time today. So one last big thank you to all of the students who were able to be with us and to share their wonderful perspective, as we could not do the work we do without you. And we just really are so thankful for you and hope that you have inspired some of our educators on here to be that person for teens in their building. So thank you all so much. And we look forward to hearing more from you in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.